At Starbound, we like to tell stories the human way, not with artificial slop or AI voices. What's HFY without humanity? So, subscribe if you want to keep it that way. My name is Dan, and let's begin. The HNV Tiamat fell through the sky like a blade thrown by God. Fleet Captain Sela Orlova stood at the forward viewport, watching Okeanos' atmosphere peel away from the carrier's heat-scarred prow in ribbons of plasma and superheated steam. The ship shuddered as it punched through another layer of the planet's perpetual storm system, lightning crawling across the deflector shields in branching networks of white fire. Through the chaos, she could see glimpses of ocean below, grey and infinite, broken only by the dark shadows of continent-sized storm cells rotating in their eternal dance. "Atmospheric transition in 90 seconds, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Barros from the helm. "All systems nominal." "Steady as she goes." Orlova clasped her hands behind her back, a posture that straightened her spine into a rigid line. 53 years old, and the old thrill of a new descent still returned. The weight of command settling into her bones alongside the artificial gravity's familiar embrace. The Tiamat was humanity's largest vessel for aquatic deployment. A supercarrier designed to serve as a mobile fortress in the crushing depths of waterworlds. Her maiden voyage, Orlova's second chance. She kept her gaze forward, away from the commemorative plaque on the bulkhead behind her. She knew the words by heart. HNV Tiamat, first of her class, named for the primordial sea dragon. Humanity had always given their warships mythological names, companions as much as machines. "Fleet Captain." A measured, inflectionless voice spoke from her right. "I must again register my concern regarding the timing of this operation." Selena Admiral Tyrus stood apart from the human crew, his tall, slender form held rigid with what Orlova recognized as discomfort. His articulated plating, a deep blue-grey like old battleship steel, lay flat and still against his frame, a conscious suppression of whatever emotional state lurked beneath. Two smaller Selenan attendants flanked him, but Orlova focused on the female to his left, younger, with plating that occasionally rippled with micro-movements before she stilled them. Curious, despite her training. "I've noted your concern, Admiral." Orlova turned to face him, her features composed. "As I explained during your briefing, the Ascendancy's trade pact with the Colonial Authority was contingent upon a demonstration of our operational capabilities. The Tiamat is that demonstration. You combine a maiden voyage with a diplomatic inspection." Tyrus's vocal cords produced a sound like stones grinding together deep underground, filtered through a translator implant that rendered his words in flat, accentless English. "In our experience, this is a recipe for compounding errors." "In our experience, Admiral, humanity thrives on challenges." Orlova allowed herself a small smile, diplomatic, measured. Combining pressure points often reveals strengths that comfort would hide. Tyrus's plating shifted microscopically. A curious philosophy. "We are a curious species." The ship breached the cloud layer. Below them, Okeanos' ocean spread to every horizon, a grey-green expanse that breathed with its own terrible life. Waves the size of mountains rose and fell in the distance, driven by perpetual winds and tides pulled by three moons in chaotic orbital interplay. The Tiamat descended toward the water surface like a falling cathedral, her running lights painting the waves in shifting patterns of red and white. "Secure all stations for water transition," Orlova commanded. "Sound the dive alarm." The klaxon wailed through the ship, 3 long notes, the ancient call of submarines since humanity first sank beneath the waves. Around her, the bridge crew moved in concert, each member securing equipment and activating pressure seals with seamless efficiency, transforming the Tiamat from a spacecraft into a deep-sea vessel. "Contact in 5 seconds, Barros reported. 4, 3, 2. The ship hit the water. The Tiamat's massive displacement tanks and hull-integrated shock dampening systems absorbed the impact, making it surprisingly gentle. A mild deceleration registered, a shift in the ship's movement from sharp corrections of atmospheric flight to the slower, more deliberate sway of aquatic navigation. Through the viewport, the grey sky vanished, replaced by a wall of churning foam that gradually cleared to reveal the blue-green twilight of Okeanos' upper ocean. "All systems green," the operations officer reported. "Pressure hull integrity confirmed. Beginning descent to operational depth." "Take us down." Orlova turned back to face the Selena delegation. "Admiral, we'll be passing through the photic zone in approximately 25 minutes. I suggest you and your staff observe from the forward observation lounge. The hunting patterns of the native fauna create spectacular light shows." Tyrus inclined his head, the gesture slightly awkward, a human mannerism he had studied, its execution still stiff. "I will take your recommendation under advisement." He paused. "Your crew performed competently." "They are the best in the fleet," Orlova said, and silently to herself, "I will keep this crew safe." 3 decks below the bridge, Chief Engineer Akio Jin stood in the cathedral of his calling and watched his visitors feign indifference. The Tiamat's main engineering deck was a marvel of human construction. A cylindrical chamber 60 meters across and 4 decks high, dominated by the steady blue glow from the ship's primary fusion reactor core. Plasma conduits ran along the walls like arteries, carrying the vessel's lifeblood to every system from weapons to life support. A low vibration hummed through the air, resonating in his teeth, a sensation Jin cherished from 30 years of service. "The layout seems disorganized," Emissary Nuri observed, her translator rendering her voice as soft and musical, at odds with the clicking undertones of her natural speech. "Your primary power distribution follows a pattern that resists my analysis. The purpose of some redundancies appear to be obscure." "Appearing being the operative word," Jin grinned, exposing teeth stained by too much coffee and too little sleep. He was a compact man, barrel-chested and permanently rumpled, with engineering schematics tattooed on his forearms and grease embedded in the lines of his palms. "See that conduit there? The ugly one that looks like someone welded it together from scrap metal and press?" Nuri looked where he pointed, toward a thick pipe that ran at an odd angle across the ceiling, bypassing the main distribution trunk through a maintenance crawl space. "It is a tertiary backup for your life support thermal regulation." "Exactly. It's an aesthetic nightmare, isn't it?" Jin walked over and patted the conduit fondly. "During the Ganymede Station incident, a micrometeorite punched through the main trunk line and severed our primary and secondary coolant systems. We had about 4 minutes before the whole station cooked. But this ugly bastard kept the air cold enough to breathe for the 6 hours it took rescue to arrive." He turned back to Nuri. 38 people alive because some engineer decided pretty mattered less than works when everything else is on fire. Nuri's plating rippled, a subtle tremor that Jin hadn't seen before. "Your species prioritizes resilience over efficiency. Efficiency is a luxury. Resilience is survival." Jin gestured broadly at the web of bypasses and manual overrides crisscrossing the engineering deck. "Out here, things go wrong. They go wrong in ways that defy prediction, ways your elegant systems overlook. So we planned for the unpredictable. We build ships that can take a beating and keep flying. We train crews that can improvise when the manuals catch fire." He smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. "We value resilience over perfection, emissary. We build to outlast anything thrown at us." "An interesting distinction." Nuri moved to a monitoring station, her posture canted forward as she studied the readouts. "Your reactor output is stable, but I notice micro-fluctuations in the magnetic containment field. Is this intentional?" Jin blinked. Most visitors struggled to read the containment displays, let alone identify fluctuations in the parts per million range. You have good eyes. We are an old species. We have learned to notice things. She looked up at him, and for a moment her plates lay completely still. The variations follow a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. That's because it is. Jin moved to stand beside her, pointing at the waveform on the display. Every ship has a structural signature, a kind of a hum that emerges from the interaction of all its systems. Most engineers try to eliminate it because it interferes with sensors and makes the calculations messier. We embrace it. He traced the pattern with his finger. This is the Tiamat's voice, her song. If you listen to it long enough, you start to hear when something's wrong before the diagnostics catch up. You speak as if the vessel is alive. Jin laughed. She's inorganic, yet more than metal and plasma. Thousands of people designed her, built her, tested her. Their decisions, their intuitions, their mistakes and corrections, they're all in her, woven into her structure. The Tiamat is what humanity looks like when we're trying our hardest. He patted the console affectionately. So yeah, maybe I talk to her sometimes. She's a good listener. Nuri's plating shifted, the segments realigning with a soft click. You are an unusual human, Chief Engineer Jin. Just call me Jin, and you only scratched the surface. Ensign Davian Mercer's station was a small alcove at the bridge's rear, dominated by a curved array of displays that painted the water around the ship in false-color sonar imagery. His speciality was psychoacoustic analysis, interpreting the complex sound signatures of deep-sea environments. You could identify the difference between a whale song and a geological shift at 1,000 kilometers, past the frequency structures of underwater communications, and detect faint anomalies in the background noise of an alien ocean. His one failure, apparently, was convincing anyone to listen. It's back, he said, adjusting his headphones. The signal had returned, stronger than before. A rhythmic pulse buried in the deep frequency range, just at the edge of audibility. On his display, it painted itself as a series of concentric rings, expanding outward from a point somewhere below and ahead on the ship's path. Lieutenant, I'm picking up the anomaly again. Same signature as before, but the amplitude has jumped. Lieutenant Commander Lin kept his eyes on his own console. Mercer, we've been over this. Okeanos has the most acoustically active ocean we've surveyed. The planet practically sings. Your anomaly is just another frequency convergence in the thermal layers. With respect, sir, frequency convergences lack coherent structure. Mercer pulled up the waveform analysis on his secondary display. Look at this. The signal has structure. There's a pattern, a repeating sequence. It's too regular to be geological. Lin turned. A muscle twitched in his jaw, though he kept his voice even. What are you suggesting? That something is talking to us? I'm suggesting the signal meets the criteria for a priority crimson alert. Mercer's voice was level, reciting the protocol. The signal's coherence, probable biological origin, and potential hostile intent all surpass the alert threshold. He swallowed. Sir, by the book, this should go straight to the bridge. The captain is entertaining diplomatic guests. Interruptions for sensor ghosts are unwelcome. Lin's tone hardened slightly. Log your observations, run another calibration cycle, and keep monitoring. False alarms on a maiden voyage end careers. If the signal persists and strengthens, then we'll escalate. Mercer bit back his argument. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that the pattern in the noise was deliberate, that the signal's regularity suggested something far more troubling than a natural phenomenon. But Lin was his superior, and Mercer was just an ensign on his first deep space assignment. Understood, sir. He turned back to his display, watching the rings pulse and expand in the false color dark. Logging observations. The signal pulsed again. On his audio translation, with the gain turned up as high as it would go, It resembled breathing. The Tiamat sank deeper. Beyond the viewports, the ocean transformed from blue-green twilight to absolute darkness. At 2,000 meters, the last traces of surface light vanished entirely, replaced by the cold glow from the ship's running lights and the occasional flicker of bioluminescent creatures fleeing from the vessel's passage. At 5,000 meters, even the deep-sea hunters with their luring lights grew sparse, the native fauna retreating to safe distances from the strange intruder in their domain. In the crew quarters, the night watch settled into their bunks for sleep. Most of them dreamed. Petty Officer Hina Ishikawa dreamed of drowning. She was swimming in an infinite ocean, suspended in darkness that felt heavy, a crushing weight against her skin. She opened her mouth to scream, and a thick, metallic fluid rushed in, something that tasted of old metal and older hate. It filled her lungs and her mind, and in the darkness a massive form stirred, watched her with eyes that defied comprehension, that thought thoughts she almost understood. She woke gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat. In the bunk below hers, Petty Officer Rashid sat bolt upright at the same moment, his eyes wide and white in the dim emergency lighting. "The dark," he whispered. "Something in the dark was watching." "I know." Ishikawa's whisper trembled. "I saw it too." 3 decks away, in the medical bay, Surgeon Lieutenant Kozlov was already fielding calls. 19 crew members had reported nightmares in the past 4 hours, an unprecedented number for a ship this size. The dreams were remarkably consistent. Darkness, pressure, watching, drowning in a fluid that mimicked water. Kozlov filed his report with a recommendation for mild sedatives for affected personnel. "First voyage anxiety," he wrote. "Common in deep ocean deployment. We'll continue monitoring." He emitted his own matching dream from the report. Mercer worked the controls with trembling fingers. The signal returned, orders of magnitude stronger than before, powerful enough to threaten bleeding into the ship's main communications channel. On his display, the concentric rings had tightened, contracted, drawn closer to the Tiamat's position. And now, for the first time, the audio translation produced something resembling words. It was a rhythm, a structure, a recurring pattern that pushed against the edges of meaning like something forcing its way through a door. Watching, coming, watching, coming. Lynn was across the bridge, deep in conversation with the navigation officer about their descent trajectory. Mercer could call him over, could try again to convince him that this was more than a sensor ghost, that a real, vast, and hungry presence was turning its attention toward them. Or he could do what the regulations said he should do. His hand moved, a decisive motion that outpaced his fear. 3 keystrokes brought up the priority Crimson protocol, the emergency alert system designed for situations requiring immediate action. 2 more keystrokes attached the raw sensor data to the alert. 1 final keystroke tagged it with a biothreat flag indicating a hostile biological entity. He hit send. On the main bridge, Captain Orlova's command console chimed. "Captain," the voice was Ensign Mercer's, piped through the alert channel with the priority Crimson header displayed in red above his words. "I'm registering an anomalous signal from the abyssal trench. The pattern is coherent and consistent with biological origin. Confidence level is 98%. Sir, something is actively observing us." Orlova turned from her conversation with Admiral Tyrus. Her gaze found Mercer's station across the bridge, meeting his with an intensity that made him want to look away. He held her stare and waited. "Put it on main speakers," she ordered. Silence fell over the bridge as the sound filled the air. It was wrong. Mercer had listened to it through headphones, filtered and processed and reduced to data. But this was different. The raw signal bypassed his ears entirely, reaching directly into the soft tissue of his brain and pressing against something primal, something older than language. It was the sound of deep water and deeper darkness, of pressure and patience and infinite alien awareness. Here, here, here. What is that? Lieutenant Commander Barros's voice was barely above a whisper. Unknown. Orlova's voice was steady, cutting through the quiet. Mercer, can you localize? Bearing 358, range approximately 40 kilometers and closing. It's below us, Captain. Rising from the trench. All hands to stations. Orlova moved to the center of the bridge, her stance widening, her shoulders squaring. I want full sensor sweep, all frequencies. Wake up anyone sleeping and get them to their posts. Someone tell me what we're looking at. The lights flickered. Every display on the bridge scrambled for a fraction of a second, filled with static and nonsense characters before snapping back to normal. After the flicker, a single sound echoed on the bridge, the entire Tiamat crew drawing a collective breath. It started with pressure. A weight that pressed behind Orlova's eyes, a squeezing sensation in her temples that built from discomfort to pain in mere moments. Around her, the bridge crew reacted, a technician pressing her palms against her skull, a helmsman doubling over his console. The communications officer letting out a thin, keening wail. The pressure gave way to visions. Lieutenant Commander Barros let out a raw, animal scream, a sound utterly alien from the normally composed helm officer. Lieutenant Commander Lin had collapsed across his console, catatonic and weeping silently. Barros was staring at the forward viewport, his hands raised as if to ward off a blow. "The water!" His voice fractured. "The walls! The water is coming through the walls!" The viewport showed only darkness and the ship's running lights. The pressure hull readings, all green, all stable. But Barros was seeing something else, something entirely disconnected from the reality around him. This was familiar. Orlova had seen it before. The attack on the Argent, the cargo cult that had found a presence in the asteroid belt, a consciousness that could reach into minds and twist them into knots. The boarding action that had cost her ship, her crew, her confidence. No. She wrenched her thoughts back to the present, refusing that memory's pull. That was then, this was now. She had survived that, and she would survive this. "All hands!" She cut through the chaos, with her voice amplified by the ship's intercom as she slapped the override. "This is Captain Orlova. We're under cognitive attack. I repeat, we're under cognitive attack. Focus on your immediate physical surroundings. Rely on the machine." Admiral Tyrus had fallen to his knees, his articulated plating spasming wildly, joints locking and unlocking, a display of terror from a species priding itself on emotional control. His aides had fled to the bridge's corners, clicking rapidly in their native language, their plating rippling. "Steel is real," Orlova began reciting the words, the old naval creed they taught at the academy, designed for moments like this. "Deck is solid, air is clean, trust the machine." The words were an anchor for their simplicity, a rope thrown to a drowning sailor, something to grab onto when the mind was spinning into chaos. Around her, crew members picked up the chant, first one voice, then another, then a ragged chorus. "Steel is real, deck is solid, air is clean, trust the machine." The pressure eased slightly. The attack continued, an alien presence pressing against their minds. Yet, the chant gave them something to hold on to, a shared reality that pushed back against the visions and the terror. "Mercer!" Orlova found the ensign at his station, pale and sweating, but still functional, as he moved his hands across his controls, knuckles white. "Report!" "It's moving, Captain." Mercer's voice was thin but steady. "Bearing unchanged, range 30 kilometers. It's rising faster now, like it knows we're aware of it." "What is it?" Mercer stopped, his eyes widening as new data flooded his display. "Oh God, Captain, I'm getting a size estimate. Based on acoustic shadow it's casting." "How big?" 50 kilometers, at minimum." Mercer looked up at her. His pupils dilated, his face bloodless. "It's bigger than the ship. It's bigger than anything we've encountered." On the main view screen, the sonar image resolved. Pixels of false color coalesced into a shape that defied biological convention. A sinuous curve of staggering dimensions rising from the darkness below. The shape of something that had slept in the planet's deepest trench since before humanity walked upright. Something that had felt the Tiamat's engine vibrations and stirred to investigate. A quick database search populated a fragmentary file on Orlova's console. Partial data from an early probe mission, classified as possible geological structure due to its scale. Designation: Ananth. Category: unknown. Status: assumed inactive. "Assumed inactive?" Orlova murmured. "Well, it has awakened." In engineering, alarms blared and systems failed. Jin felt the cognitive attack like a chilling mental force that slammed into his consciousness and tried to rip it apart. For a terrible moment, he was back on Ganymede, watching the station come apart around him, hearing the screams of his friends as their atmosphere vented into space. "Chief!" Someone was shaking him, hands on his shoulders, a voice in his ear. "Chief, I need you present." He blinked. The engineering deck swam back into focus. But wrong. All wrong. Garbage data filled half his displays. The reactor output was spiking wildly. 3 of his technicians had collapsed to the floor, curled into fetal positions and whimpering. And the lights. The lights were pulsing in a rhythm that matched the presence outside. The voice in his head. The entity that wanted him to give up and let go and sink. "I'm here." His voice was a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm here. Status report." The speaker was Emissary Nuri. Her plating vibrated so fast it blurred, but her voice was steady as she moved her hands across an auxiliary console. "The cognitive interference has compromised your computer systems. The cognitive interference is bleeding into your electromagnetic spectrum. I count 8 critical power conduits approaching overload." 8? Jin staggered to his feet, his mind crawling its way back to functionality. "Impossible. We hardened the systems." "Your hardening protects against conventional interference." Nuri pointed at the nearest display. "The entity is attacking the substrate itself, the pathway analogs in your processors. Your machines are experiencing fear." For a moment, Jin could only stare at her. Despite everything, he laughed. A single, sharp bark that cut through the alarm's wail. "The machines are afraid. That's a new one." "I suggest manual overrides." Nuri was already moving toward the power distribution node, her long fingers finding the emergency access panel. "Physical disconnection of compromised circuits. Your ship's redundant architecture should maintain critical systems while we isolate the interference." "You're suggesting we lobotomize my ship?" "I'm suggesting you save your ship by any means necessary." Jin looked at her for a long moment. He grabbed a cutting torch from the nearest equipment locker and tossed it to her. "You take circuits 3 through 8. I'll handle the rest. And for the record..." He fired up his own torch, the blue flame casting sharp shadows across his face. "When this is over, I am buying you a drink. Several drinks." Nuri caught the tool smoothly. "I abstain from human intoxicants." "In that case, I'll drink yours too." They got to work. The second attack struck without warning. Orlova had just finished ordering the ship's psychoacoustic dampener deployment, emergency systems designed to ward off the territorial displays of Okeanos' native fauna, when the wave hit. It was different this time. A focused, targeted assault. She was on the Argent again. The ship was dying around her, klaxons wailing, hull breaches venting atmosphere, the screams of her crew filling the corridors. She was running toward the bridge, but the corridor stretched out before her, endless and dark, and each step lengthened the distance. "The captain's unresponsive." She was in the engine room. No, the medical bay. No, standing over a body. Her navigator, her friend, the young woman who had served with her for 3 years, now floating in zero gravity with wide open eyes and a mouth frozen in a scream. Ma'am, you need to come back." Someone was shaking her, calling her name. But she was drowning in memory, in guilt, in the crushing certainty that she had failed them all, that she was failing them again, that she would always fail. A hand slapped across her face. Olova gasped, the vision shattering. She was on the Tiamat's bridge, her executive officer's hand raised for another blow, if necessary. Her crew watching her, their faces pale and taut. "Captain!" Exo Acosta's voice was low, urgent. "You're back. Stay with us." "The Argent." Olova's voice was a whisper. It made me remember the Argent. "It's doing that to everyone. Tailored nightmares. Our worst memories weaponized." Acosta's jaw was tight. "It's trying to break us, ma'am. Make us give up." Olova took a breath. And then another. The paralysis broke, replaced by something harder, something older. She had spent 2 years in therapy, learning to live with her failures, clawing her way back to command through sheer will and determination to do better, to be better, to keep her crew safe. This thing wanted to use her past against her? Let it try. "Helm, evasive maneuvers." She spoke, her voice ringing steady across the bridge. "Take us down to 7,500 meters and increase speed to flank. If this thing wants to eat us, it's going to have to work for it." "The creature is ignoring the dampness." Mercer's voice cut through the tense quiet on the bridge as the Tiamat drove deeper into the ocean, her engines straining against the abyss's pressure. On his display, the Ananth was matching their descent, its staggering bulk moving with an unexpected quickness. "I can see that." Olova watched the sonar image update, the creature's form growing clearer with each sweep. It was ancient, primordial, native to this ocean since before life took any other form. A deep ocean god, quiescent for millennia. Until now. "What's it doing?" "It's absorbing our signal rather than recoiling from it." He darted his fingers across his displays. "The dampness creates a cognitive null zone by broadcasting counter-frequencies. But the Ananth, it's incorporating them somehow, using them as a carrier wave." His screen showed the Ananth wave pattern syncing with the ship's own structural noise, feeding on it. He muttered, "A wave can be countered with destructive interference." He looked up, his eyes wide with sudden realization. "Captain, we're approaching this wrong. Blocking it is futile. We have to counter it." "Explain." "The psychoacoustic dampeners work by broadcasting static, a random noise designed to disrupt biological frequencies, but the Ananth is too powerful." He gestured as he talked, pulling up schematics and waveform analyses. "But every ship has a unique structural signature, a vibration that emerges from the interaction of all its systems. If we could isolate that signature, amplify it, invert it, and broadcast it back into the water?" Acosta raised an eyebrow. "You want to fight a cognitive attack with the sound of our own hull?" "Not the sound, the silence." Mercer turned to face them both. "The Tiamat's structural signature is uniquely hers. If we broadcast it inverted, it will create a null zone. For us, a bubble of silence around the hull, cancelling its cognitive field." All over studied the ensign. 24 years old, on his first deep space assignment, standing on a bridge full of veterans and suggesting they weaponize their own ship's heartbeat against an ancient god. Either he was brilliant, or he was insane. Possibly both. Jin, she keyed the engineering channel. Get up here. We need your expertise. 3 minutes later, Jin stood at Mercer's station, his face illuminated by the sonar display's glow. Nuri stood beside him. You want to do what? Jin stared at the schematic Mercer had pulled up. Broadcast the Tiamat structural signature, inverted and amplified through the main sonar array. Mercer's voice was steady, though his hands had a slight tremor. It should create a cognitive null zone around the hull, a bubble of silence to shield us from the creature's attacks. Should. Jin rubbed his face with both hands. This is an entirely new procedure. The energy draw alone will slag our transducers. We designed the active array for short pulses, for pinging. You're asking me to turn a strobe light into a laser beam. I'm asking you to save the ship. Chief Jin, Nuri's voice was quiet. I have been observing your reactor output since we entered the engineering deck. The fluctuations I noted earlier, the heartbeat you described. If Ensign Mercer's theory is correct, that pattern is the key. The signature is already present in your power systems. We would need to isolate, amplify, and redirect it. Jin looked at her. You're saying we already have the signal. We just need to turn up the volume? In simplified terms, yes. And you think the emitters can handle it? I think humans built your ship to prioritize resilience over elegance. Nuri's plating shifted. If any vessel could survive this, it would be the Tiamat. Jin was silent for a long moment. He let out a short, surprised laugh. Okay, let's do this. He turned to all over. Captain, I need full access to the power distribution network and authorization to redirect reactor output. We are going to need almost everything we've got. You'll have it. All over granted it instantly. Mercer, you're on signal isolation. Nuri? She paused, the alien title strange on her tongue. Emissary, can you assist in engineering? Nuri inclined her head. I would be honored to assist, Captain. Move, all of you. They moved. In engineering, Jin and Nuri worked side by side, moving their hands across consoles and through maintenance conduits as they rewired the Tiamat's power distribution network. The ship's reactor hummed its signature pattern, captured and amplified by a jury-rigged system of sensors and relays. Power flowed through repurposed channels, straining conduits and tripping safety overrides that Jin manually bypassed one by one. Coolant pressure approaching critical, Nuri reported from her station. Recommend reducing power flow by 15%. Negative. We need every watt. Jin wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of grease. Override the safety protocols on channels 8 and 9. That will risk system failure if we maintain this output for more than... I know what it'll risk. Jin met her eyes. Hitting this thing with anything less than our full power means losing the ship. Nuri held his gaze for a long moment. She turned silently and entered the override codes. On the bridge, Mercer hunched over his station. His headphones clamped tightly against his skull as he filtered through the Tiamat's background noise, searching for the specific signature that would save them all. The process was painstaking, separating the ship's voice from the roar of its engines, the hum of its life support, the thousand smaller sounds of a vessel in operation. I've got it. His voice was hoarse with strain. Signature isolated, sending to engineering now. Jin, do you have it? All over demanded. Receiving. A pause. Okay, I see it. That beautiful, ugly noise. Mercer, you're sure about the inversion? Mathematically, yes. Practically, we're about to find out. Good enough. He spoke over the comms, his voice crackling, taut with energy. Captain, we're ready. On your order, we broadcast. Oliver looked at the main view screen. The Ananth filled it now, a living shadow that blotted out the darkness around it. Its form shifted with each sonar sweep, a mass of curves and angles suggesting an existence in more dimensions than human eyes perceived. And at its center, barely visible in the false color display, something that might have been an eye, vast and cold and ancient beyond measure. Broadcast. The Tiamat sang. From the main sonar array, a pulse of energy erupted. Something deeper than conventional sound, something that resonated with the water around the ship and created a ripple of inverted energy expanding outward in all directions. The pulse carried the Tiamat's unique signature, her structural heartbeat transformed into a weapon of cancellation. For a terrible moment, the creature withstood the pulse. The cognitive pressure against the crew's minds intensified, as if the Ananth sensed what they were attempting and pushed back with all its ancient power. Oliver felt her vision blur, felt the Argent trying to claw its way back into her consciousness. A profound silence fell, more than the lack of sound. It was the cessation of that terrible alien presence that pressed against her mind since the attack began. Around her, the bridge crew gasped and swayed, released from a grip whose hold they had only just recognized. "It's working!" Mercer's voice was awed. "The null zone is stable. The broadcast neutralizes the creature's cognitive field within the zone." On the main view screen, the Ananth recoiled. Its staggering form writhed in confusion or pain, pulling back from the ship as if burned. For the first time since this nightmare began, they had hurt it. "Maintain the broadcast." Oliver's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. "How long can we hold this?" "At current power levels?" Jin's response came over the comm, strained but determined. "Maybe 20 minutes. After that, the emitters burn out and we're defenseless." 20 minutes. Oliver looked at the sonar display, at the vast shadow that still circled them like a predator, denied its prey. 20 minutes to come up with a plan, to find some way to escape or destroy a creature older than human civilization. "So, we have 20 minutes, she said. "Let's make them count." 14 minutes later, the Ananth stopped waiting. The creature attacked with brute force this time, a massive section of its body slamming into the Tiamat's hull with enough impact to throw Orlova off her feet. The ship groaned, metal screaming under stresses beyond its design parameters. On the damage control display, red lights blossomed across the starboard sections. "Hull breach, decks 8 through 9. Acosta was already routing emergency teams. "Containment fields holding, but structural integrity is failing." Another impact, harder than the first. The lights flickered and died, replaced by red emergency strips along the walls. In the darkness, Orlova heard the ship crying out in pain. "It's trying to crush us," Mercer spoke from somewhere to her left. "Our broadcast is holding against its cognitive attacks, so it has adapted. It's going to kill us the old-fashioned way." Orlova pulled herself upright, using her command chair, her mind racing. The Tiamat was bleeding atmosphere and losing structural integrity. Their cognitive shield was draining power they desperately needed. And outside, circling them with patient hunger, an ancient god waited for them to die. Think like the captain your training prepared you for." Their power signature had initially drawn the Ananth to them. The ship's reactor emissions, a beacon in the deep's darkness. It was a predator, following the scent of prey. And like all predators, it could be... Jin! Her voice was sharp. How much plasma do we have in reserve? Plasma? Jin's confusion was audible. Reserve tanks are at 60%. Why? Can you vent it? Create a flare outside the ship? A pause, followed by, yes, but that would be like ringing a dinner bell. The creature would follow it. Oliver's smile was cold. It follows our energy signature because that's how it hunts, so we give it something brighter to chase. She keyed the all-hands channel. All stations, prepare for emergency maneuver. We're going to make that thing move. The plan was a desperate gamble. Jin vented plasma from a damaged nacelle on the port side. The superheated gas screamed as it hit the cold water, a chaotic roar of thermal expansion that blossomed in the darkness. The energy signature was intense, overwhelming, far brighter and more attractive than the Tiamat's dimming reactor emissions. The Ananth responded. On the sonar display, Oliver watched the creature's massive form shift, pulled away from crushing the ship's hull toward the new, more tempting prize. It opened its maw, if that's what it was, revealing depths of luring lights and darkness that made her eyes water to look upon. It lunged toward the plasma flare, drawn by instinct, older than thought. Now! Oliver barked. Arm the Graviton Lance. The Graviton Lance was the Tiamat's primary armament, a weapon designed for ship-to-ship combat in the vacuum of space. Firing it underwater, under these pressures, was entirely theoretical. The calculations and the engineers said it should work. But theory and application were different things entirely, especially at these depths. Lance is charging. Acosta's voice was tight. 60%, 70, 80. The Ananth's maw closed on the plasma flare. For a moment, it seemed satisfied, distracted. Its attention returned to the ship, toward the real prey, toward the mortal creatures that had dared to disturb its eternal slumber. 90%! The creature turned. Its staggering bulk moved, building speed, preparing for a final, devastating strike that would splinter the Tiamat's hull. 100%, Lance ready. Jin's voice crackled over the comm, strained to breaking. Captain, firing in this pressure might tear us apart. Oliver gave the command instantly. Fire! The universe became light. The Graviton Lance discharged, a focused beam of distorted space-time that punched through the water between the Tiamat and the approaching Ananth. At these depths, in this medium, the beam behaved in novel ways. It warped and twisted, dragging the ocean with it, creating a corridor of vacuum and violence that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. The beam struck the Ananth directly in its open maw. For an instant, Oliver saw everything. The creature's internal structure, bioluminescent organs that might have been hearts or brains or something else entirely. The ancient and alien architecture of a being that had existed since this ocean was young. The creature imploded. Gravity turned against it. The Ananth's massive form collapsed inward, crushed by forces outside its evolutionary existence. Its light, that terrible, mesmerizing glow that had haunted the crew's nightmares, flickered once, twice, and went dark. The cognitive pressure that had lurked at the null zone's edges vanished entirely. The recoil slammed into the Tiamat. The ship bucked and groaned. Hull plates shrieked as they absorbed stresses far beyond their ratings. In engineering, Jin watched 3 consoles explode in showers of sparks. On the bridge, Acosta flew against a bulkhead and lay still. The lights died again, came back, died again. Silence. True silence. Damage report! Orlova's voice was barely above a whisper. Her throat felt raw. Her hands were shaking. Structural integrity at 42%. The voice was Mercer's, calm despite everything. Multiple hull breaches, engine output at 30%, life support nominal. He paused. Captain, we're alive. Alive? Orlova slumped back in her command chair and stared at the view screen. Where Ananth had been, only darkness and the slow settling of debris from the creature's destruction remained. A ship and crew determined to live had destroyed the ancient god of Okeanos' depths. Yes, Ensign. Her voice broke. We are. The Tiamat rose through the depths, her engines straining against the damage that would have destroyed a lesser vessel. Emergency crews worked through the night, sealing breaches and stabilizing systems, holding the ship together with improvised patches and grim determination. In the medical bay, medics treated the wounded. 19 serious injuries, with all crew members surviving. A miracle, the surgeon said. Or stubbornness. With humans, it was often hard to tell the difference. Your methodology is unorthodox, Nuri observed in engineering, watching Jin splice a power conduit with his bare hands. Does it work? Yes. In that case, it is innovative. Jin grinned, exhaustion carving deep lines in his face. You know, you're quite capable for an alien bureaucrat. Ever considered switching careers? Nuri's plating gave a series of soft clicks, a sound Jin recognized as amusement. The Ascendancy has strict career paths. The Ascendancy sounds boring. It is efficient. Same thing. Hours later, as the Tiamat breached the surface and transmitted its first distress signal to the orbital stations above, Captain Orlova stood alone on the forward observation deck. The storm above had cleared, revealing a sky full of unfamiliar stars and the distant glow of Okeanos' moons. The ocean stretched to every horizon, calm now, as if to erase any sign of the recent violence. Footsteps sounded behind her, heavy, deliberate, accompanied by the soft click of artificial plating. Captain Orlova. Admiral Tyrus moved to stand beside her. His plating was still and controlled, but his posture held a new looseness, as if some internal structure had shifted and not quite settled back into place. Admiral, Orlova kept her gaze fixed on the horizon. I trust your accommodations have been adequate? They have been memorable. Tyrus was silent for a long moment, watching the stars wheel overhead. Your Navy's designation, the Sleeping Leviathan. We believed it a monument to your arrogance. Orlova smiled faintly. Many species do. An understandable assumption. We assumed the title referred to the scale of your military ambitions. Tyrus turned to face her, his plating rippling once. Now I see it is a description of a state of being, rather than a statement of power. Orlova met his gaze. Go on. Our simulations predicted your vessel's destruction with overwhelming certainty, Tyrus said, his voice flat with the weight of failed logic. Every metric, structural stress, crew panic probability, antagonist capability, pointed to your failure. And yet, here you are. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the battered ship around them. Your species solves problems with unpredictable models. You improvise solutions where solutions seem absent. It is a variable beyond our logic. A dangerous variable. We are a young species, Admiral, Orlova said. We have had little time to perfect our systems. We have survived by being stubborn, by our determination to live when the universe tells us we should die. You introduce chaos into every system you touch, Tyrus stated, His tone was that of an observer stating a fact. But it is a productive chaos. His plate stilled when he spoke again. His voice was different. It is illogical, it is inefficient, and it may be the most valuable commodity in the galaxy. Olova allowed herself a small smile. Is that a compliment? I am uncertain. Tyrus's own plating shifted with a brief, complex pattern. My report to the High Directorate will require significant revision. Take all the time you need. We will be here. Olova turned to face the observation window fully, her reflection ghosting over the stars. The Tiamat needs repairs, several months at minimum, but we'll be back in the deep before long. It's where we belong. You would return after this, Admiral. Olova's voice was gentle but firm. We came to Okeanos because it was hard, because every other species looked at this ocean and deemed the risk too great. We looked at the same things and saw a challenge. She paused. That's what the sleeping Leviathan means. We feel pain, we feel fear, but when we feel pain and fear, we continue. We wake up, we fight back, and we win. Tyrus was silent for a long time. The stars wheeled overhead, and the ocean breathed below. And somehow, in the depths, an ancient god's remnants settled into the abyssal trench's silt. I will report to the Ascendancy High Directorate, he said at last. My recommendation will be different than I expected when this voyage began. He inclined his head, a deeper, more fluid gesture than before, then departed. Olova stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars and the ocean and the slow, patient dawn breaking over the horizon of a world that had tried to kill her and failed. The ship had sustained damage. Her crew was exhausted. They had faced an ancient god and won by the slimmest of margins, through stubbornness and innovation and the simple will to endure. A quintessentially human victory, she reflected. Below her in engineering, Jin was teaching Nuri how to properly calibrate a plasma injector. On the bridge, Mercer was reviewing the sensor logs, already writing his report on the Anansa's cognitive capabilities for future reference. In the medical bay, Acosta was arguing with the surgeon about returning to duty, her concussion a minor detail in her view. The Tiamat lived, her crew lived, and somewhere out there among the stars and the deeps and the vast dark spaces between them, other challenges waited. Other monsters to defeat, other chances to prove that humanity was more than just another species, struggling for survival in an indifferent universe. Something that could look into the abyss and stare back. The sleeping Leviathan. Olova smiled and turned from the window. There was work to do. Reports to file, damage to assess, crews to commend. The victory was won, yet the war would continue. There would always be another crisis, another incredible situation, another moment when the universe demanded that humanity prove itself worthy of existence. And humanity would answer, as they always had, as they always would. With stubbornness, with ingenuity, with simple, indomitable will to survive. The Leviathan was awake now, and it intended to stay awake.